my strategy has evolved over time. And I founded Next Level Income to help share with others the lessons that I learned over the course of the last 20 years so people can take a shortcut so they don't have to waste 15 years, as I often say I did, in figuring out the right way to do things.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me. I'm excited to have you here. And I have a friend of mine here, a great guy named Chris Larsen, who today is going to speak about Next Level Income. He is the founder and managing partner of Next Level Income. He's been investing and managing in real estate for over 20 years. When he was a college student, he bought his first rental property and distressed at the age of 21. He expanded that into development, private lending, building into commercial offices, and ultimately syndicating multifamily properties. He's done, since 2016, over $400 million in real estate acquisitions. He's passionate about helping investors, definitely passionate about that. I know him personally. And he's definitely going to show you guys how to become financially independent through Next Level Income. Welcome to the show, Chris. It's great to have you here.
Neil, it's great to be here. I'm very excited. And man, I always enjoy our conversations, whether they're recorded or not recorded.
Yeah, we've had some good ones over the year, haven't we? As we've gotten to know each other. Yeah. Well, it's been such an interesting time. And I know real estate's been a very interesting place to be. And I'm really got some questions for you as to what you've seen, from last year headed into next year as we're recording this, and kind of get your insights into that. But first, I want people to know you just a little bit better. I have some insight into your history, and I know that some of the very dramatic, life-changing events that you had in the past kind of shaped who you are today. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to share that with your audience. And if you're listening today, I share all this in my book, and I'll tell you how you can get a copy of Next Level Income at our website, nextlevelincome.com. But yeah, I think, as you kind of alluded to, when I was young, I was 5. I lost my father and my mother, and then eventually my stepfather raised me. And it took me many years, really only until a couple of years ago, before I realized kind of what an impact it had. But I think when you lose somebody in your life, it makes you realize that life is finite and time is finite. And if you realize something's finite, if a resource is scarce, the value of that resource goes up. And I think when we're young, we don't really think about time. We think time's unlimited and we waste a lot of time. And I don't think I wasted a lot of time in my life, because I had this realization that time was precious. But I lived my life. I played sports when I was younger. Did pretty well in school. But then I found cycling when I was in high school. I started racing bicycles when I was age 14, and that was my passion. I went to college for engineering at Virginia Tech, but I met my best friend on the bike, and he became my college roommate. And I didn't really want to be an engineer. I wanted to be a professional cyclist. But then again, circumstances in life kind of threw me back on my rear end. Between my freshman and sophomore years, my best friend Chris passed away. Had a brain hemorrhage. Went to the hospital. I knew he had what I thought was an accident. And I walked in, and I was the one that identified his body there. I went back to school, raced my bike for another year, kind of muddled through classes. And I was, by all accounts, I was depressed. At the end of that year, I decided I didn't want to race my bike anymore because I wasn't happy. And it seemed kind of silly to me to be riding my bike around when there was so much more in life. And if you know anything about cycling, you hear about Lance Armstrong and, professional athletes that make a lot of money. Most athletes don't make a lot of money unless you're at the high end of the sport. And cyclists are no exception. They're actually, kind of at the bottom of the food chain when it comes to compensation. So I always had kind of a side gig or something going on. And when I got back to college, I said, you know what? I don't want to have any regrets. I want to live life to the fullest. And right away I said, I have to have money to be able to do these things. I was always interested in being an entrepreneur. I had a little side business when I was a kid. I had a paper route. I had a little lawn care business, and I would do leaves and snow and shovel snow in the winter. So when my friends worked for minimum wage, 20 hours a week, I'd go and make twice what they did in a month in one weekend. So I always kind of knew there were better ways to do things.
Oh man, you had a little hustle going on, right?
Oh yeah, always. So I was fortunate because my parents they didn't push me in any direction, but they supported that. And when I got back to school, I discovered the stock market. I was day trading, and I was making some months $5,000 as a junior in college. This was back in the 90s. not bad. Like it was pretty exciting, but it was also super stressful. So as I laid there in bed one morning at 3 a.m., not sleeping, worrying about, what trade I was going to make the next day, I thought, man, do I want to be doing this in 20 years?
Right.
And the answer was no. I didn't want to do that. So over those like 4 or 5 years when I was finishing undergrad and in grad school, I read 250 books on money, investing. I discovered real estate. I bought my first property, as you mentioned in the intro, at age 21, and went on to buy, we're over 3,000 doors now. And, it's my strategy has evolved over time, and I founded Next Level Income to help share with others the lessons that I learned over the course of the last 20 years, so people can take a shortcut so they don't have to waste 15 years, as I often say I did, in figuring out the right way to do things.
Very cool. So as you got going, I was just listening to your story here, an avid cyclist. That's very cool. I don't know if I ever told you this, but I loved mountain biking. I grew up doing it when I was a kid in Oregon. And when we moved to Colorado, one of the reasons why we moved to Castle Rock was its elevation and its trails to get back.
Awesome.
And obviously going down the trails in Pikes Peak and stuff, we had a lot of fun doing that.
Come visit in Nashville. Let's go mountain bike, Neil.
I know, right? Well, I don't have quite all the equipment or the skill sets.
I got an e-bike you can borrow so you can keep
an e-bike. Oh, that's cold, man. That's like beta. I'll talk about mountain bike and you're going off on e-bikes. No, let's go down and grab a soy latte together. That'd be awesome. Sorry, I borrowed a voice there. So what was driving that? I know that the challenges in life were driving it, but there was more there because some people get caught up in that and mindset kind of wrecks them and they don't take action while having the challenges of those life events, right? And sometimes it incapacitates people. Why didn't it incapacitate you, Chris? Why didn't you just huddle in the corner and cry yourself to sleep at night? Like, what was driving you beyond?
First off, I think my faith was there. So when I was young, my father died. My mother said we were standing there on the side of Lake Michigan. His plane went down in Lake Michigan, and she said we were standing there. And I turned to her and I grabbed her hand and I said, "Mom, it's going to be okay. Dad is with Jesus now." And so I always had this, whether it was faith or optimism, but I think when you have a belief that life is going to be okay, that there's something bigger than you, and that things happen for a reason, I always had that feeling. And I don't know if it's partly, if it's nature, nurture. I think all the events that I talked about kind of helped that. Like when you go through something, right? Joe Rogan says, and I think he took the quote from somebody, but I was listening to his podcast last week or 2 weeks ago, and he said a great quote. He goes, "The worst thing that happened to you is the worst thing that's happened to you." And so when you lose your father or you lose your best friend, everything else that happens in life, it's not quite as bad. When something happens to you and it doesn't kill you, then I think, a lot of people could maybe become paralyzed. But I think because I had experiences like that, I knew that I could get through it again. Now, I will say I don't know if I was incapacitated, but my grades were horrible my sophomore year, to the point where if I continued, I wouldn't have had a degree. So I really had to dig out of that hole my last 2 years. But I will say, because I had cycling and I had that passion, it was really like my therapy, and being able to channel that energy and use that. I think what happened was I took something that was a passion for me in life and used it as a tool to help pull me out of that experience. So that year I was, tremendously successful on the bike. I was an All-American cyclist. Became a Category 1 cyclist, which basically means you're the same level as a professional. So I use that to channel things. And then when you go through that and you see that, I tell a lot of people I gained so much from cycling, and it's because of that. You realize that, man, you can do so much more than you think you're capable of. So I think it was a combination of different factors. And I was also very fortunate. I had some people that were incredibly supportive during that period of time as well.
Well, and it sounds like you have kind of the entrepreneurial ping pong that I like to refer to it. Similar to my story a little bit. You bounced and you were kind of like a ping pong there for a little while. Or maybe even a pinball machine, it felt like, getting slapped around a little bit as you bounced from thing to thing. But you were progressively figuring out what you wanted to do. And that's some of the things I understand about entrepreneurs now, having been in this, capacity for 15 plus years, is something I didn't understand in the corporate world or even in the system that I came from previously. And that was adaptability. That word speaks to me for you today because you adapted to your situation and you continued to change. And while you bounced, that may have looked pretty weird to people outside of your thinking. Which it probably does to a lot of people who kind of think, if I'm going to try this next thing, if I'm going to get into tenant real estate investing, that sounds to me like a ping ball move. Like I feel stable. This thing I've got right here, if I try to go over here or go over there or change things, what's the risk? And you encompassed that feel the fear and do it anyways mantra, right? Of just getting there, getting it done, doing what we call imperfect action. And I appreciate that about you. And where you've landed now, I think, is kind of where you found your home base in what you're doing with the way you've structured your business, from what I understand. And as we're going to get into that a little bit more here in the next few minutes, you refer to it as the holy grail of your business, of the world, right? And where you're aligned with where you're headed from the previous year to the next year. Give us some insights. Do you still think of that as the holy grail? Do you still feel like that is a big opportunity for the coming year?
I've been trained as an engineer, and I took the PE, so people would say, oh, you're an engineer. You took the professional engineer exam, you passed. But I never practiced as an engineer. But I was taught to think that way. And as an engineer, you're taught to make a set of assumptions, and then you solve a problem. Yeah. So when I looked at my portfolio, I had all these single family properties. I was managing them myself. I was taking the phone calls. I was dealing with the headaches, the brokers, the maintenance, all this stuff. It was okay. When I was introduced to investing in apartments, multifamily, I said, okay, why would I want to do that? So I looked at the returns, but I looked at the demographics. I looked at the big tidal shifts underneath the market. And I said, all right, is this going to be a space that I can invest in for the next 10 to 20 years? And this is why I wrote the book, Neil. I go through this here, and it's, I go through the demographic section and why I call it the Holy Grail. And let's see, I'll tell you exactly, what chapter it is here. But you look at the demographics. It was chapter 6 in the book. So it's page 52 if you want to download the book and dive in. In chapter 7, I talk about the rising tide. And if you look at the charts I put in here that I'm holding up, you see this increase and this stabilization that occurs. And what that is, that's the population of renters in this country. When I made my first investment, I decided to invest in 2013. We're now over 8 years, going into 9 years past that point. I didn't predict what was happening, but everything we're seeing today, the shortage of units I talk about in my book, we talk about the increase in renters that I talk in my book. These things are trends that anybody can look into. And they started 10 years ago, and they're not going to go away in the next 10 weeks or 10 months. They're going to persist, because what happened was, in the last 10 years, coming out of the Great Recession, we didn't build enough units. We didn't build enough apartments. We didn't build enough houses. And what happens is, if you don't supply the market, that is a trickle-down effect. So that means there's not enough affordable housing. That means there's not enough subsidized housing. That means there's not enough kind of nice apartments that are maybe 20 years old that are, that aren't luxury, but they're class A, things that if you're, making $100,000 a year, you'd like to live into, you'd like to move into. And then the other thing that is compounded on top of those long-term trends, Neil, are what's been caused by COVID. So I moved to Asheville with my wife, and now we raised our family here in 2008. And I have the spreadsheet to prove it, but we were living in the DC area. And I said, you know what? I want to live in an area that one of the authors I followed called them exurbs. So basically these areas that were outside of major population centers that had really high quality of life, lower cost of living. And, everything that I read was saying, hey, technology is going to increase. And I went to Virginia Tech. We were the first college in the country to have Ethernet. So we had Ethernet in the dorms. And I will tell you, if you want to, if you take a bunch of teenage boys and you provide them with Ethernet, you learn a lot of interesting things your first year as a freshman of what you can do.
Dangerous things can happen,
with the internet. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh gosh, yeah, I remember those days.
But as a professional, now we know, we can do things like this, Neil. We can talk almost as if we're face to face. So I knew that these trends were coming. we made the choice to move to Asheville to one of these areas because I said, you know what, let's move to an area that we love, like we'd love to live in, but it is also going to benefit from these trends as younger people, professionals, kind of find out this secret. Well, COVID poured gasoline on this fire, so to speak. So now if you're living in the Northeast and you can work from home, do you want to live in the Northeast? Do you want to be locked in your house, have to wear a mask everywhere, be mandated to have a vaccine to get into a restaurant and pay exorbitant taxes on top of that, and the weather sucks? Or would you like to live in an area like Fort Myers, Florida, where we're buying our current apartment, where you have zero state tax? There's no mask mandate. The weather's gorgeous. I was down there the first part of December, and there were a dozen people hanging out at the pool enjoying the 85-degree sun, which is probably also really good for your health to be out in the sun.
Extremely
and enjoy
good for
those
your health.
sorts
Vitamin
of things.
D3. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, we have these long-term trends compounded with the short-term trends from COVID. And I think what's going to happen is that's going to set up not only to keep the housing market buoyant in terms of residential, like regular houses, but also the apartment market as well. And I would say, again, I don't have a crystal ball, but I think these trends are going to continue probably for the next 3 to 5 years until supply catches up and, some of the policies catch up with this demand.
Well, now you're invested in a thing called Venture South, right? An equity group that's helping to kind of formulate this all, and you're a part of that, if I'm not mistaken. And you also use the concept of infinite banking, right?
Correct.
To go out and kind of create your own bank. Can you speak to a little bit about that and its role that it played in you guys creating this many doors in the areas you're talking about?
Venture South is a venture capital network that's across the Carolinas and as well as Virginia right now. And as my obligations as a father and our company's grown, I don't get to participate quite as much as I'd like to in that anymore. But it's exciting. It's done a lot of great things for the area. The group investigates, does due diligence, and invests in a lot of kind of early stage companies in the Southeast. But from an investment perspective, and more to answer your question, Neil, infinite banking is a concept that's outlined by Nelson Nash, and he has a great book called Becoming Your Own Banker. And I learned about this strategy. It really is a strategy or concept, and it's easy to remember how long ago it was because my older son's going to be 12 years old, and we started our policies the year before he was born. So I learned about this concept 13 years ago. And what infinite banking is, it's the ability to utilize specific insurance contracts to not only provide life insurance, provide a legacy for your family, but also maximize the cash value of your life insurance. Now, if you understand real estate, you understand the concept of cash value life insurance or whole life insurance. And the thing is, if you own a house, you build equity in that house. Your mortgage is flat. Let's say you have a 30-year mortgage. You pay the same, say $2,000 a month mortgage for 30 years. And as the house grows in value, you get equity. You pay down the principal and you get equity. If you go and you rent, your rent might start off at, say, $1,500 a month instead of that $2,000 a month mortgage. Before you know it, it's above $2,000 and it continues to escalate. It's just like term life insurance. As you get older, term life insurance costs more. The other thing with term life insurance or renting an apartment, you don't gain equity. Now, what's cool is if you start one of these life insurance policies, you structure it properly, and your cash value grows or that equity in your policy grows, you can now borrow that money. And if you structure it properly, what we do, we actually borrow the money out of our policies at about 3%, and we're earning more than 5% inside the policy. So if you're listening, that might sound confusing, but here's what it means. I can literally borrow money at a lower rate than the money I'm earning it inside the policy. So if I put $1 in the policy, I can take $1 back out and still earn basically a net 2%. Now, how do I utilize that? I actually wrote another chapter. I rewrote the book and I added chapter 3 and I call it Your Opportunity Fund. And your opportunity fund is using this strategy. And what we do is we fund our life insurance policy. Then we use the cash value in there to invest in cash flow investments. So not only are we getting the arbitrage 2% or so inside the policy, we're also getting the increase that we're getting in our investments in real estate. So, over the years, what's happened is as these opportunities have come up, Neil, we've been able to draw on the money in these policies to invest in things like spec homes, like our multifamily real estate, and other things. Now, I'll also say the most powerful thing that I've used this for was in March of 2020. So COVID hit. Now you got to think about how scary this is. This is somebody that has, well over 1,000 doors of apartments. I'm also still running a team in the medical device industry. They shut the hospitals down and people stopped paying rent.
Right.
I'm building the house with my wife. I turned to my wife and I said, I don't know if we're going to make any money this quarter going into Q2 of 2020. So we were able to pull a year's worth of expenses out of our life insurance policies that day and put that in our bank account. And you can't imagine, well, I guess maybe you can imagine the security that gave us, because I knew that no matter what happened, I could pay for everything that our family needed for at least a year at that time. So it's a very powerful strategy, not just for protection of your family, but also to supercharge your investments. And we have a whole section on the website now under the banking link. And the strategy, we've named it the investment optimizer, because you can actually increase the return on your portfolio if you utilize this strategy, which is really wild.
Very, very cool. Well, Chris, this is amazing. That's a huge concept, and it's not new, as you said. You got started 13 years ago. So if anybody thinks, this may be the first time someone's heard about this, but obviously this is not a new strategy. It's a very smart investment strategy. And maybe if you didn't understand all the details of what Chris just said, although he did a very eloquent job of explaining it, simplicity is the key to explaining things for people to understand. And you did a very good job of that. His book, Next Level Income, will obviously help you understand how to make and keep and grow that money and get that holy grail experience. If you're interested, check out the book. Obviously, his website. Chris, where do they go grab this book? Is it on Amazon? Can they go to your website and check out some more information? Where do they find you?
Yeah, if you want to buy it on Amazon, please go ahead. But look, if you're listening today, go to nextlevelincome.com, click on the book link. You can immediately download the ebook as well as a free audio version. And if you put your address in today for your listeners, Neil, if you're listening, I'll even send you a copy of Next Level Income. And you should get that here very shortly.
Fantastic, guys. So check that out. Absolutely. Chris is a genius. That's why I've had him on here. He's obviously going after his next million, the next 1,000 doors, and his opportunity, as he called it, his holy grail. And obviously taking the concept of infinite banking and deploying it very smart as both a risk management, as you mentioned, for March of when COVID hit, as well as an opportunity to take cash flow and deploy it into places like multifamily real estate. Guys, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you coming on today, Chris. Thanks for explaining some more, guys. Go check out his website, get his book, grab a copy of it on Amazon, learn a little bit more about the concepts that have been shared on the show today. Chris, thanks again for coming on board.
Neil, always a pleasure talking to you, my friend.